Welcome to tonight's debate. I'm your moderator, Kyone Wolf. Tonight's debate is sponsored by Connecticut Brotherhood of Ersatz Broadcasters, the National Scented Candle Institute, the Association of Extruded Pet Food Manufacturers, and Alcoa, a global leader in lightweight metals technology. Our questions tonight will be asked by our panelists Mike Douglas, Mark Davis, John Paul Stevens, Aaron Paul, Stephen Paul Mitchell, and Douglas Mark Paul Michael Stephen. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question. His opponent will have 2 minutes to respond to that answer, followed by a 1-minute response to the answer, followed by a bathroom break, followed by an allocation of minutes and an amount divisible by 3 for idle chatter. There's no standing 8 count, no 3 knockdown rule. If I say break up the clinch, each fighter take 2 steps back. You get knocked down, you get up again. I'm never going to keep you down. You get knocked down, you get up again. I'm never going to keep you down. We agreed to flip a coin to see how we'll decide who goes first. The coin came up heads. That means we use rock, paper, scissors. Everybody with me so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
Who am I debating?
Who are you debating? Who are you debating? I don't have that here.
So all these rules refer to a debate in which there is no opponent?
You know what? I can't worry about every little thing here. Could you run back and forth between the 2 podiums?
I suppose. I was really looking forward to debating somebody.
Well, this is not a perfect world. Political debating is never a perfect world. That's the focus of our show today. Also, don't forget how much a scented candle like pumpkin ginger bark can really perk up a room. And now he's known as the Candy Crawley of modern cockfighting, Colin McEnroe.
And I'm proud of that, by the way. All right. It's actually a sobriquet that I myself have promulgated. All right. So we're going to talk about debates. And this is kind of an unusual thing that we're doing here. Because, in fact, 3 of us sitting in this room, 3 of the 4 people sitting in this room, at the immediate conclusion of our show, are going to go toddling over to the Hartford Hilton. Actually, it's not written in stone that we'll toddle, but we'll go over to the Hartford Hilton and prepare ourselves for an actual gubernatorial debate. So let me tell you who's here. And as we go along here, we're going to talk a little bit about debates in general, how they've gone, how ones in this season have gone. As we go along here, we'd love to hear from you if you have probably rampant dissatisfactions with the current state of political debate or things you'd like to see or things you'd like to hear. 860-275-7266. That's 860-275-7266. That's the number to call. You may tweet us at WNPR Colin. You may be tweeted back at by our tweetmaster, Greg Hill. In studio with us right now, Kevin McMahon. He's the John R. Reitmeyer Professor of Political Science at Trinity. And because of his august academic reputation, he does not have to participate in today's gubernatorial debate. The rest of us do, including Dennis House, an Emmy Award-winning journalist and, of course, anchor at WFSB, and Jennifer Bernstein, a journalist and anchor at Fox, Connecticut. There is a debate this afternoon at 4 at the Hartford Hilton. I will be the moderator. God help us. And then Dennis and Jen will be joined by Keisha Grant, Mark Davis, and Steve Kochko, who we're not going to talk about because they didn't come to the show today. So, just forget about them for now. So, Dennis, I wanted to start with you just because not too long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, you were moderating one of these debates. It was a different format from what we'll have today, where there are 5 interrogators. It was just you and Tom Foley and that other guy, Dan Malloy, on stage. First of all, I'm dying to pick your brain for advice on how to be a moderator, although today I'm a glorified timekeeper. You were really the Jim Lehrer of this debate. You were asking the questions. How did you go into that? What were your objectives as a moderator on that day?
Well, first of all, Colin, thank you for having me on today. I have interviewed Tom Foley and Governor Malloy, as you have, many times over the last 4 years. So it's difficult to come up with a question that they've not answered. Mm-hmm. And they're very media accessible. These guys will go on camera when you want them. They go to a lot of events. They're not hiding out like some candidates in other states. So they've really been thrown thousands of questions in the last 48 months.
We might have even liked them to hide out like candidates in other states.
Exactly.
But they refused to.
So that was my goal, to come up with questions that they had not been asked before, or if we talked about an issue, to ask it in a different way.
And Jen, not to give away your hand or anything like that, but as you're thinking about today's debate and the questions you'll ask, one of the things that I saw a lot of in Dennis's debate, and it's a struggle that for all moderators, is what's called the pivot. In fact, Wolfie, do we have that piece of tape available here? This is actually, we've got a little clip from Game Change, which was the HBO documentary, in which docudrama, in which Julianne Moore played Sarah Palin. We have a little clip. Let me just set the scene for you. It's in fact the debate with Biden and Palin has been coached extensively on how to execute this particular maneuver. And so what you hear a little bit of sort of the faux version of that debate, and then you hear Woody Harrelson as the campaign manager who's been coaching her the whole time. You can hear him in the background. They're watching it on the video monitors and kind of encouraging her to do this certain thing. Let's hear that clip if we have it.
Governor, please, if you want to respond to Senator McCain's comments about health care.
Pivot.
I'd like to respond about the tax increases and...
Yeah.
Darn right, we need tax relief.
So that's the pivot, and it's becoming more and more of a tool for people. Dennis asked really great questions. Sometimes the candidate would answer for about 20 seconds ago, but I'd really like to talk about something else. I don't know, is that a concern to you? Do you want to get your specific question answered?
Well, I think with the Hartford Courant and Fox Connecticut debate where we were able to watch them, they did answer the questions, but then they would turn to what topic they wanted to talk about. So you definitely saw that during that. And the way that debate was set up was interesting because it was different from before. They had a lot more rebuttal time and rebuttal chances to kind of talk about whatever they were trying to, or their message that they were trying to get across. But I wanted to, when I had formed questions for this debate, I agree with exactly what Dennis has said. We've heard them talk about transportation, economy, education, all of the main topics, and they do differ on those a lot. But I wanted to ask questions that I hadn't heard that do affect people that I personally know in my life. And obviously we had a few questions left over from the other debate that we didn't end up using. But it's funny to listen to that parody because I watched some of the Sarah Palin Biden debate and I hadn't seen the parody.
Yeah, and it's not even really a parody. It's really it is as close to a representation. It's based on Mark Halperin's book Game Change, where they found out as much as they can, and that is their representation of what was going on behind the scenes. That whole idea of pivot. If you don't have a good answer to that question, or the answer to that question doesn't really favor you, talk about something else, and you'll get away with it. So, Kevin McMahon, that brings up the question of what debates are for. Why are there political debates? Why do we need them? Why are they any better than a press conference or some other way of asking unscripted questions of candidates?
Yeah, I mean, historically, they're really essential for democracy, right? This is a chance for either reporters or the man on the street when that type of question is asked to force these candidates to say what they stand for. Sometimes that's done by press conference, but increasingly candidates don't use press conferences very, very often. So the debates are really a chance to hear what they have to say about a particular issue. Although really, I mean, their history begins kind of in 1960. I mean, there was no ingrained tradition of at least presidential debates prior to 1960. And some theorists, including people like Daniel Boorstin in The Image and more recently Michael Schudson in The Good Citizen, say, well, really, these are in some ways events that are as much about television as they are about anything else. They happened at the ascendancy of television. They actually were an opportunity for television to represent itself as a force for public good and a force for the public interest in the wake of the quiz show scandals. Television stock had gone down ethically, and suddenly they could say, no, this is something we do that nobody else can do. And so in 1960, I believe there were more people watching the Nixon-Kennedy debates than voted in that election.
Yeah, I mean, certainly more recently, the importance of TV has, as you highlighted, is certainly the case. But you certainly have historic examples as well, like Lincoln Douglas as a famous debate. And so, it certainly has a longer history than just 1960. And since 1960, that's become increasingly important, in part because 1960 was the first and then the last, as you recall, until 1976, because Nixon avoided doing them after 1960. And they've become really a centerpiece of the presidential campaign in recent times.
Yeah, and by the way, in 1858, the Douglas-Lincoln debates was a little bit was different in purpose too, because U.S. senators were elected by state legislatures at the time, so it wasn't necessarily even a showcase to win over a certain kind of voter. Those voters weren't even voting in that race. But after that, they became a relatively rare thing. I think Wilkie tried to get Roosevelt to debate him on radio, and Roosevelt didn't want to do it. And that raises another question that comes up, and it's coming up right now. I mean, even in Connecticut, we have a situation, Dennis, which I'm sure you'll be covering this week on your Sunday show, and may have covered already, where Denise Napier, who's a candidate for treasurer, not the most high-profile race in the world, but her opponent, Tim Herbst, he wants to debate her. He thought he was going to debate her. She pulled out of the debate on the day of the debate. And then that kind of raises a question. Do we as an electorate and do we as a press corps, for that matter, have some right to demand that every 4 years these candidates get up and subject themselves to this process?
It's interesting. Someone in our newsroom suggested yesterday that it should be a state law, that you must, in order to get public financing, you have to commit to a public debate. I think we're very fortunate in this state that Dan Malloy and Tom Foley have put themselves out there so frequently to debate. Look at California, the last Senate election. Dianne Feinstein, longtime senator there, in a state that was really a financial mess, was refusing to debate her opponent and got away with it and was reelected. So I think the voters are well served by debates, but a lot of candidates feel they don't have to do them because they can have all this advertising, which is probably the number one way they reach the voters.
Absolutely. Well, prior to the 1960 debate, in fact, that's what candidates did. They bought bulk amounts of TV time, and so it was kind of a wonderful thing to them in 1960, where suddenly they were sitting there in front of Howard K. Smith and not having to pay for any of the time. And Jen, I don't know, do you agree with all that? I mean, now having been through a gubernatorial debate already, I mean, are they intrinsically valuable? Are they worth fighting for?
Absolutely. I mean, I think they're incredibly important for the public. I mean, the 1960 debate that you're talking about obviously shows that you can do really well as a candidate or you can do really badly with it. Obviously, the Nixon image hurt him, although on the radio when I was reading about it more, people thought that Nixon did better than JFK. Here in the state, I think that Denise does have a responsibility to the voters and whatever is going on and why she didn't come to that specifically or why she hasn't been responding to the press for the last couple of months, whatever reason it is, it comes off as cavalier and it comes off as if, you don't care and you have one of the most powerful positions in the state. I mean, you control tens of thousands of people's pensions here in the state. So I think it is important for you to get up there and talk about it and defend your 16-year tenure.
I mean, this doesn't apply to the treasurer's debate, Kevin McMahon, but one of the arguments that raised itself about debates subsequent to 1960 is that really they were more about mastery of television. And as Jen was alluding to, people who heard the debate on the radio thought Nixon was doing better. There's a certain amount of historical mythologizing about all this stuff about the 1960 debate. Some of it, is sort of collective memory as opposed to perfect accuracy. But it started up a conversation, and the conversation was, are these really debates about who can master the medium as opposed to a window into the minds of these candidates? In so many ways, a political debate is not like any other debate. It's almost a misnomer to call them a debate. A debate otherwise always has a topic. Mm-hmm. If you and I are going to have a debate, it's probably going to be about, a specific topic. We're not going to debate about whether I'm a better person than you. That only happens in political debates. All other debates are about the merits of some question. But so the critique is, well, this isn't really a debate. It's really about who can get over on the other person in a particular medium, that medium being television.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the format. I mean, you can have what's called a group press conference. You see this often in presidential primaries where there's 7 or 8 individuals standing up on the stage, and it really becomes, one person gets 90 seconds, and it becomes really not much more than just their talking points, right? But and then you also have town hall style debates where, the individuals who are asking the question probably don't know as much about the issue as a reporter who's asking a question from a panel and can have follow-up questions. If you allow for more extended time, if you allow for reporters to ask the question, I think you can get a better sense of what these candidates are like.
I'm wondering, Jen, as the undoubtedly youngest person in the room, and probably by at least a decade.
Really?
Whether or not any of this strikes you? Obviously, your career's in television. You therefore love and believe in television. There will always be television. Mm-hmm. But we're in a radically altered media landscape today, and the primacy of television isn't really what it was in 1960. People get their information in much more complicated mosaics, and I'm wondering whether that whole idea of some cameras trained on two or more candidates with people often or almost always from the television profession asking a lot of questions. Does that seem to you like it's sort of written into the DNA code of the future, or can you imagine, 10 years from now, some very different way that reflects the more scattered digital reality?
I think that will still exist. I think that the medium that you watch it from is what is changing. So you have us streaming it live on the web. You have people tweeting about it. You have the candidates all on Twitter because that's how people, younger people communicate a lot of times. And then you have all of the social media aspects of that. So I do think that you'll still have cameras and people talking. And, in 10 years, I would say yes. I just think that people are going to be watching them from different devices and at different times and on their own time, and not necessarily if the debate's at 7 o'clock. Maybe they're not sitting in front of the television and watching it right then, but I do still think people will be viewing it.
Then is that there's an odd paradox in all that too, because even sometimes when you've got an especially compelling thing going on your Sunday morning show, it becomes an online event, and some of us are sitting there live tweeting it and making fun of whoever you're talking to, and
or me,
or you, or having a really good. We never make fun of you, Dennis. You are flawless. There's nothing. You give us nothing to work with.
See, I love Colin. We go back so long. I was a guest on his show back 22 years ago. It used to be a lot of fun. But anyway,
so you give us nothing to work with. But so on the one hand, Jen's absolutely right. There's time switching, so these aren't necessarily real time events. On the other hand, there's another thing that's going on, which was when you were moderating the other night, people were watching in real time and spinning it. Either spinning it because they had agendas or spinning it because that's what they like to do with their Twitter accounts or to amuse themselves. Events exist very differently now.
They certainly do. People can respond instantly, and they have their own viewpoints, and they want to get them out there. If I could pivot for one quick moment, to talk about the Napier debate, It's interesting how there's so much focus on a debate for the state treasurer's office, but there's no outcry or no demand for one for the attorney general's office or for a Larson-Corey debate in CT1 or an Esty Greenberg debate to be televised. And that opens up another question. Why is her race such a focus this particular year? Because her opponent has made it such, I would say, right?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think this is the point that Jim, one of our callers, by the way, 860-275-7266, 860-275-7266. This is Jim, one of our callers. He's from Woodbridge. What's on your mind, Jim?
It's Tim, and I was just going to piggyback on what Dennis was talking about. Why we're focused mostly, on television. It's bizarre. There's lots of radio stations. A couple of years ago, I heard more debates on the gubernatorial from a rock station out of the New Haven area than I did from other places. So, radio has a tremendous possibility of having debates. But, Secretary of State, these offices oftentimes have no debates, or there might be at the Hartford Library where no one sees them. So a little bit of it is, why aren't there congressional debates? Well, part of the reason I hear, maybe you, Colin, and a few dozen people who actually kind of control the political discussion is, well, no one's going to win this. No one's going to win, upset Courtney, so why is anybody going to televise this debate? People put their stamp of approval on what's a hot race and what's a cold race, and if we could have more competitive races with almost guaranteeing that somebody out of New Haven will get to debate Rosa DeLauro, maybe more people would turn out for those races.
And Courtney's opponent in the second, Tim?
I have no idea. I don't live in the second.
Lori Kavanaugh.
Yeah, there you go. Very good. That is very good. But look. First of all, I just I don't disagree with Tim as much as he thinks. I do think all races should be treated as competitive. We talked about this on the Wheelhouse. I brought it up on the Wheelhouse a few weeks ago. That I do feel as though not just as a matter of debates, but all of these races should not be regarded as runaways, and that in the media we're all a little bit culpable to the degree to which we fetishize and focus on this kind of close looking gubernatorial race kind of to the exclusion of a lot of other stuff. Although, I mean, I think Greenberg-Esty is the other one. I mean, it's weird too because Jen, I mean, news is news, and so he's right. As a matter of democracy, all of these races should be treated pretty even-handedly. But news is news, and so the close race, the potentially closer race, is the most interesting one to us, although that also can become kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy too. I don't know how we sort that out. I'm expecting you and your generation to do that.
That's a lot of responsibility. No, I agree with you. I mean, obviously I'm not the one who's sitting in the decision room when we say we're going to take this debate or we're going to carry this one. I mean, we've been reading obviously for months about what are perceived to be the close races, which are the governor's race and the 5th congressional district. But I agree. I mean, I think every race should be taken seriously. I don't think anyone should take their spot for granted. It's a public spot that people have put you in, have put your trust in, and you shouldn't just you should be campaigning, you should be talking to people. But yes, at some point, it's like if you don't have that forum on TV or a chance to talk to your opponent and have the public view it, then where do you go?
We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to start Kevin McMahon off on the whole question of who gets to go to debates. It's been a pretty hotly debated question here in the Connecticut debate. Meanwhile, we got a tweet from DFA New Haven. He tweets, in order to receive public financing, or perhaps she tweets, in order to receive public financing in New Haven mayoral races, candidates must participate in at least one debate. And they also have to wait in the Sally's Pizza line at least once if they want to run for mayor. All right, we'll be back.
He told us of his courage and his prowess in the war. The welfare state his rival built perpetuates the poor. He'll tow your car, he'll tax your bill. With him it never ends. You'll ride the filthy subways while he's got himself a Benz. His student loan defaulted back in...
All right, we're talking about debates today as we get ready for a 4 p.m. debate over at the Hartford Hilton. Dennis House and Jen Bernstein are here in studio with me from WFSB and Fox Connecticut, respectively. They will be panelists in this debate, which by some accident of filing, I have been asked to moderate. I keep expecting somebody to say, well, no, that was a mistake. You're not really the moderator. But Dennis is going to keep me calm about this. He's already signed off on my wardrobe.
You look good, Colin.
I'm feeling better. I'm not comfortable. Kevin McMahon is with us. He's the John R. Reitmeyer Professor of Political Science at Trinity. By the way, we're getting phone calls. Diana and Bill, I will get to you. We're getting tweets at WNPR. Colin, Neil Connor's tweets apropos of where we're headed right now. Governor Cuomo wouldn't debate Zephyr Teachout. Tom Foley won't debate Joe Visconti. Is that an attempt to avoid an emperor/no-clothes moment? I think it's a lot of different things, and I'm sure Dennis and Jen have some thoughts about this. But, I don't know. There's no engraved principle, I would assume, Kevin, about who gets to be on the stage, how that gets decided. We've seen the impact that a Ross Perot made in 1992, maybe even a John Anderson in 80,
yes.
I think. Sometimes third-party candidates, even in presidential debates, get onto the stage. I don't know. Is there any sort of way of thinking about this, either abstractly or concretely?
Yeah, part of, and as this connects to earlier questions, but part of why we have debates and who gets invited is pure strategy, right? So if you think a third-party candidate is somehow going to attract votes away from you, you don't want that person to be there, or you don't want to attend that debate if he or she shows up. And I think there could be some type of formula if it's done before the campaign begins, right? So if you have a public opinion poll and the person has to be in double digits or, 5 points, if you had that sort of set up before the actual campaign begins, that might be the best way. The problem is, particularly with presidential debates, is that oftentimes the people who are writing the rules are the candidates themselves or the campaign. So they get structured in such a way that it makes it difficult for you to get beyond that and deal with these other issues.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters used to run presidential debates, and then they withdrew, and then that Commission on Presidential Debates was formed, which really that's the candidates themselves. Here in Connecticut, a more free-flowing thing. We have a lot of opportunities, debate after debate after debate, to figure out what the rules are. So Dennis, how does this look to you? Different people are doing different things. The latest news, it's alluded to in the tweet from from Neil Connors is that at least in one instance, the third-party candidate Joe Visconti is going to be allowed into the NBC Connecticut debate, and that means that Tom Foley doesn't want to be in it. I mean, how does that landscape look to you, and particularly vis-a-vis how these decisions get made?
Well, at WFSB, our policy is you must score 10% in a poll, and Joe Visconti did not at the time of our planning of the debate. I believe he was at 6 or 7% in the Quinnipiac poll, so we did not include him in that debate. If you look at the national presidential debates, Ralph Nader, a nationally recognized figure with millions of followers, was not allowed to debate, and I don't know how he scored in the polls. I don't recall right now, but he was not allowed to be there. We've had Joseph Visconti on many times on Face the State. We'll probably have him on again before the election, but that was the policy, and we had to stick with it.
Jen, how do you parse all that?
I mean, we have the same policy over with the Harvard Current and Fox Connecticut with the 10%. You know, it's tough because Visconti has been kind of on the cusp of that. So it feels like at some point he should have that forum. Now, we've done the same thing that Dennis was just talking about. We've had Visconti on a lot. You know, I've put him on our show also with Al Terzi and given him the forum. If he's reached out to me and he wanted to talk about something, we've been able to give him that forum. But, yeah, I don't have a clear answer with that either because there's no, you know, rule in general, nationally or really locally. It's an organization that generally picks what the rules are.
May I add just one quick thing, and that is that state lawmakers and the governor who signed off on this in terms of or Governor Earl campaign financing excludes third-party candidates and independent candidates as well. So they have set up that structure.
Yeah, well, it's just incredibly hard for a third-party candidate to qualify for public financing. It's not impossible, but it's really, really hard for a third-party candidate to qualify. And similarly, it's a little bit easier to get that line and maybe hold that ballot line. But, you know, I'm just wondering whether there's a contrasting good here. In other words, you know, ideally we want a system that doesn't – I mean, we want a system that maybe privileges the two major parties, although I'm not exactly sure what the rationale for that is. But we also – there's something, to me anyway – endemic to the American myth that, you know, if you're Mr. Smith, if you're some guy who thinks you could do a pretty good job, maybe do a better job than these other two guys, why shouldn't you have a voice? You know, why shouldn't you have a voice? And since you probably can't afford the advertising, since you can't afford all these other things, since, as Dennis is suggesting, public financing is really going to be a reach, even in a state like ours that has a remarkable citizens elections program, debates might be one of the few chances you could get to place yourself up against. And, you know, think about the debate that Jerry hosted a few years ago, Jerry Brooks at 30, where he had Chris Murphy and he had Lee Whitnam and Matthew Oakes and Susan Beisowitz. And it was a pretty rowdy debate. I mean, two of these candidates were absolutely marginal candidates. Right. But it was a different kind of debate, too. And I don't know how to say, well, those two people really don't deserve to be part of that.
Right. Yeah, I think you're making the argument that third-party candidates often say the reason why they're at only 6 or 7% is because they don't have the exposure, either because of funds or because they're not invited to these debates. So it's a system that continues because of the way it's set up, and that ultimately isn't fair. But you know, certainly not only in the U.S. but across the world, you have systems that exclude certain parties sometimes if they get a certain percentage in proportional representation systems. If they don't get a certain percentage, then they're even excluded from, you know, serving in office. So it's not an uncommon thing to say that fringe candidates or fringe parties don't get to participate in the same way.
Let me grab a call or two here, 860-275-7266. Here's Craig in Wallingford. Hi, Craig.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Okay, Colin, you said before that the debates usually wind up being a tie or something of that nature. All of the debates I've seen so far, I pretty much know the answers that you're going to hear to the questions that are posed by the questioners. What I would love to see is a half of the debate devoted to allowing the candidates to question themselves and allow the moderator to step in at a certain time during the answering and shift the questioning to the other fella. I think that we'd learn a lot more about the candidates that way.
So in other words, you'd like to see the candidates question each other, not question themselves. The candidates never question themselves. That's how they become candidates. But let me put a little bit of perspective into that, and I do want to hear what the others have to say. First of all, let me say that the way that debates were structured initially, or particularly around that 1960 debate, the negotiations were that the candidates didn't want to talk back and forth. They were glad to have a moderator interposed between them, because to do otherwise puts them in the position of kind of the prosecuting attorney, drilling the other candidate, and that never looks good. You don't want to seem aggressive if you're a candidate. Think about Rick Lazio and Hillary Clinton in that famous debate. So candidates, for the most part, like having a moderator, don't want to have their own attack dog dragged out here. I don't know all the details of this, and I shouldn't be talking, but the New London Day debate, which my colleague Mr. John Dankosky is hosting in a little while, I've got the date here. I'll give it to you in a second. I think that's a little longer form anyway, and I don't know how much back and forth there are, but I think one of the things they're going for with that anyway is to deformalize the kind of 2-2-1 thing. But Dennis, once again, just having moderated a debate between these two guys, and these are two guys who don't like each other that much anyway, they're probably happy to have you there. I mean, do you think anything would be accomplished by Craig's idea of letting them just go right back and forth with each other?
I think it would be really interesting to just let them go at it, but I don't know that either side would agree with that. They all have campaign handlers, and it's not good for anybody. The advisor is going to say, listen, he's going to ask you this, he's going to put you in a difficult position, you're going to look like a fool. And so I can't imagine whoever puts together these debate rules, and both campaigns get together usually with the television station or the organizers and hash out how it should be done. I don't think that they would ever go for that. But it would be interesting to watch.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, there's like contracts about rules and everything like that in these things. So
we had a Lee Whitman in our debate too, and she went after Chris Murphy, and she took a swipe at Susan Beiswitz, I believe, as well. It was fascinating to watch.
She didn't call anybody a whore, though, right?
I forget exactly.
That was the moment that we all remember in the 30 debate where she turned to Chris Murphy and said, "We have whore." And I thought, that's why I want these third-party candidates in this debate.
She called him a liar in ours, and a few weeks later, she decided to up it to that word.
Well, I mean, back to the point. Actually, let me take Bill from Cheshire, because he may actually make that point. I'm not 100% sure. Here's Bill in Cheshire. Hi.
Oh, hi. It's Bill, actually, but Bill is fine for today.
We're great with the names today, aren't we?
Seems to be a theme.
So you've mentioned the Lincoln-Douglas debates quite a few times, and being from Illinois and also being a student of Harold Heiser, the Lincoln historian, the debate format was there was no moderator. They flipped a coin. Whoever won the coin toss could go first or second. Whoever went first had a solid, I believe it was 30 minutes to talk. The second one had a full hour to talk, and then the first one had the last half hour. It was kind of like a summation at a trial. There was the back and forth was in half hour to an hour chunks, and it was all about presenting positions, maybe contrasting their positions to the other candidate, but it was not personal attacks. It was about educating the audience, and it was about getting their ideas out there. What we have now with these moderators and all these questions is candidates who are basically trying to hide their positions and not present them, and hope that they get in some good sound bites along the way.
Bill, I think you're absolutely right.
I would just not have moderators and just have the candidates up there, but not back and forth like a tennis match.
All right. Good point. 860-275-7266 is your number. Bill, I missed some of what you said because I was getting a text and I was sending an email, and I also looked at something on YouTube, because really like half an hour to concentrate on an answer, I don't think in 2014 we have that capacity. There's just like too much going on. But you were nodding, Kevin, during that. What was your reaction to what he was saying?
Well, I guess I don't really agree if you have the right format that you can't get something out of the candidates. If you have a reporter who can do a follow up, you can avoid the pivot. I think you can come back to the question and really put the person in a position where he or she has to answer the question. I think if done properly, and I know it's difficult for a reporter who is supposed to be objective to sometimes appear a little hostile. But I do think you can learn a lot from debates, even when the candidates are trying to avoid giving an honest answer.
You know, one of the things I think that concerned me about this last debate was if they did not answer the question, I had the discretion to do a follow-up and say, well, you haven't answered this question. But if the same candidate didn't answer 3 questions in a row and the other one did, then I look like I'm picking on someone and someone's going to say that I'm biased.
Yeah.
So it's a dicey situation. A lot of debates, you ask the question, they get the rebuttal, and the moderator stays out of it.
For that reason, one of the formats that I do like is the town hall format. I mean, it's imperfect, but you know these formats where even in the presidential debates where you have a group of people who come in and they get to ask questions, because I think candidates, politicians are used to blowing us off, right? I mean they're we have a long-standing transactional relationship with candidates, and nobody's going to say, that was so heartless the way he didn't answer Jen Bernstein's question. How could he possibly ignore her? Well, I mean,
someone
basically
did write that on my Facebook.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, there's one person who believes in your humanity. That's good.
Ex-candidate did not answer your question, Jen. And
right.
I was like,
but I mean, but that's perceived as a tactical decision by the candidate. Whereas if the single mother of 3 stands up and asks some kind of question about the safety net, and you blow it off, you, the candidate, blow it off, there's a price you pay for that. I mean, George H.W. Bush did pay that price in his town hall debate, where Clinton seemed to be able to interact a whole lot more effectively and naturally with human beings. It's, I don't know, Dennis. I mean, I feel like they're used to us, these candidates, but real people, might stand a chance of getting real answers out of them.
Yeah, I agree. And real people also want to see some new things out of the candidate. There were so many people who believed that Al Gore was more qualified than George Bush and John Kerry than George Bush. But look, he came across more likable in both those debates, both those years, and that may have tilted the balance in his favor.
the sigh, right?
The sigh.
Things like that.
Yeah, which is mastery of a medium, understanding where you are. George H.W. Bush looking at his watch.
Yeah, exactly.
These little things like that, which are not entirely significant. Rick Perry unable to come up with the third thing of 3, although, I mean, I have senior moments like that all the time. But, those they become kind of defining moments in a way that I think is more reflective of the medium you're in as opposed to a real evaluation of the qualities of a person's mind.
No, I certainly agree that, those town hall debates do force the candidates to answer a person on the street type of question. My concern about with that format is it's more difficult to do a follow-up. The questions tend to be a little more vague. They tend to be easier to answer, I think, than when you have sort of a sharper question from a reporter.
All right, let's grab a little break here. We're happy to take your phone calls as we come back. We'll start with John in Milford and your tweets at WNPR Colin. But our phone number is 860-275-7266. As far as I'm concerned, you can even suggest questions that you would like to hear asked today or at one of the future debates in the Malloy-Foley race, or if you've got issues about some of these other races and whether you'd like to see a debate featuring some of the other candidates. Give us a call, 860-275-7266. We'll be nice.
We are going to insist that China plays by the same rules.
They're hacking into our computers, counterfeiting our goods, stealing our intellectual property, our patents, our designs.
Okay. China's a potential partner if it's following the rules.
We want to trade with them, but you got to play by the rules.
Now that we're finally bringing troops home, won't the Afghans be lonely when they're all alone?
When Afghans are perfectly capable of defending their own country, there's no reason why Americans should die.
The Taliban, they're going to come rushing back in when we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, my opponent is a complex man whose mastery of information technology conceals the soul of a poet and dramatist.
You have 20 seconds to run to the other podium and respond.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would object to my opponent's words if he were not such a caring husband and wonderful father. Nice use of the subjunctive, other me.
This is boring. Today's show was produced by Betsy Kaplan and me. The two Greg Hills appeared in our intro and tweet for us at WNPR Colin. Our interns are Colleen Mason and Nia Tyler. The part of Bill Curry was played by John Lovitz. For show pages, articles, and videos of the Faith Middleton Show staff debating Dan Quayle, visit our website, WNPR.org. On tomorrow's show, the nose continues its war against pumpkin spice. And now, back to Colin.
That may not be what we talk about on the nose tomorrow, but I had to think of something on short notice. We have some other ideas about the nose, including actually, I'll just quickly mention one thing, which is that in New York City, right now, they are contemplating a change in public documents that would allow you to self-identify your gender on your birth certificate, on your driver's license, and then all the other public documents that flow from there, so that even in the teeth, if as it were, of what your anatomy is, or your hormones or whatever, you can just sort of say, no, this is who I am, this is what I am. That would be a pretty revolutionary thing. Meanwhile, of course, in the world of sports, there are other very biologically denotative debates going on about who's a woman, who can compete, and those have been going on too. So we're negotiating right now about what we're going to talk about on the nose. We don't exactly know. In studio with me right now, Jen Bernstein. She's a journalist and anchor at Fox Connecticut. Dennis House, journalist and anchor at WFSB Channel 3. Kevin McMahon, John R. Reitmeyer, professor of political science at Trinity. Three of the four of us are going over to the Hartford Hilton right after this to get ready for today's debate, which will take place at 4 p.m. and then be broadcast God knows when on God knows. Is anybody carrying it live?
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
All the stations.
All the stations are carrying it live. Okay.
I don't think we are, but we're re-airing it on Sunday or airing it on Sunday.
Okay, all right.
Just dial around frantically or check your Comcast guide or something, and you'll figure out. And then Mr. Dankosky will be hosting a debate. It's a WNPR CPTV and the Day of New London debate. That's October 16th, 8 p.m., Guard Arts Theater. As I say, that'll be moderated by our own John Dankosky. So that's all of our debate information for now. Let me go to the phones here, and then I have a specific thing that I want to start Kevin off on and maybe get the whole panel to talk about as we head down the home stretch here. Here's Alex in New Haven. It says, you have a cool idea, Alex. You better have a cool idea now.
Colin, thanks for taking my phone call. I was thinking that there's so much dispute about facts that it would be great if the moderator could focus on what they do, but at the same time have a little panel off to the side that immediately, when they bring up facts and figures, can actually maybe come in afterwards and say, okay, well, so-and-so said this, but these are actually the facts. And let me give you an example. Tom Foley likes to talk about how Malloy, state of Connecticut, is 48th or 49th in job creation, which is true, but that's been true for a long time. And that kind of thing might, educate the public. So that was my comment.
First of all, Alex, I think you're bringing up a really, really important point. This is a cool idea. So the other part of this, I'll give you my suggestion, which is 86% facetious, but kind of based on what you're saying. I think by common agreement, I'm not sure whether Jen and Dennis would go in with me 100% on this, but by most agreement, those of us who cover politics, most of us believe that the person who really understands the numbers is Keith Faniff from the Connecticut Mirror, that nobody else really is quite on the same par with Keith because he basically has decided to have no life. And so, he just geeks out on all this stuff. So my plan was that next election cycle, we should run Keith as a third-party candidate, get him up over 10% in the polls, no matter what we have to do. And then he'd be on stage for the debates. And so then somebody would say something about jobs or numbers or something like that, and Keith would go, well, that's not true.
Sort of like ESPN, they have those statisticians. Right. This is the 14th game in a row that Tom Brady has started with whatever, and they come up with these random statistics that really impress you. We could use that.
But it kind of does lead to what I wanted to ask all of you. But Kevin, I'm going to start with you. Because actually during the break, you used the phrase or a phrase like so-and-so had a better night than somebody else, or I think somebody, quote-unquote, won that debate or prevailed or whatever. So what does that mean now? In this day and age, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge it means something pretty subjective. You may be looking for more meat as a political scientist than somebody who's got, a bag of Doritos and a couple of beers and is watching this.
Yeah, that's
not that you're not watching it.
It's a hard question to answer. I think you can gain information. I think if somebody says, for example, we need leadership, right? I think you have to represent that as a candidate, right? If you say that you're smart, you have to come across in that way, right? So I think some of it is just to the extent to which a candidate represents what he or she is saying.
Yeah. Am I plausibly the thing that I say that I am, and am I plausibly the thing that I'm running for? Although that's pretty ineffable, too. That's a difficult thing to pin down. I don't know, Jen, do you have another way of thinking about this or thinking about the way people think about it?
I mean, are you referring to the fact – well, I mean, if you look at some of the messages that we're seeing in some of these debates, you have them both throwing out what they want your perception of the other candidate to be.
Mm-hmm. So that may be a way of winning. If you can drive home your negative message about the other candidate, that may be a strange Pyrrhic kind of victory.
Yeah, I think Governor Malloy wants Tom Foley to look like a billionaire who can't relate to the everyday person, and Tom Foley wants Governor Malloy to look like a career politician who's out of touch or isn't equipped to handle what the state has gone through economically.
How about you, Kevin? How about you, Dennis? As you evaluate or as you watch evaluations, I mean, you have to be sort of careful. It's not really, for the most part, usually your job to say, well, so-and-so had a better night than so-and-so. But as you tacitly evaluate that, how does it look to you?
Well, it's interesting. I had my back to the audience, as you know, so I couldn't watch how the audience reacted to this particular debate. I got comments on Facebook and Twitter and things like that later. But on Sunday, I hosted a moderated a forum between Joe Visconti, Dan Malloy, and Tom Foley. They did not appear together. They each had a half hour, and they were asked the same questions. But I got to wander around the audience and pick people to ask questions, so I got to actually hear their reactions. It's interesting. A lot of people are kind of sick of the gun question. Mm-hmm. They're sick of it being asked because they know what the answer is going to be, and it's never going to change among any three of them. And Governor Malloy brings it up because he knows it's a negative for Tom Foley and Joe Visconti. It's a positive for him. So they like to bring it up. But I think the viewers and the voters might be tired of hearing it.
We've got an email here from James saying maybe no one would have the attention span, maybe, quote, no one would have the attention span to listen to long debates, but TV networks and cable channels can barely be convinced to carry these things in any kind of substantial format in the first place. Why not have real academic debates that are not carried on the air but recorded for anyone who wants to watch them on YouTube or something? And then reporters and political wonks who care about this stuff can pay attention live and disseminate the positions that were laid out by the candidates to the larger public. Boy, this email itself is almost TLDR. It seems like the crux – I'm kidding. It seems like the crux of this issue is whether debates are just supposed to be a source of information straight from the horse's mouth or if they're also supposed to be a form of live entertainment. I vote for the former. Kevin, he raises an interesting point, but I think – and by the way, if anybody wants to read something really interesting about this, Michael Schudson's book, The Good Citizen, which I have sitting right here, there's a little segment about political debates. And if you read it, you will realize how unoriginal all my ideas today have been. But, he basically says, well, it's ritual too, right? We now have – after 1960 anyway, this notion of ritual and that whether or not it serves as an admirable way of extracting information about the qualities of a candidate's mind or not, it kind of is what it is. It's a ritual and people expect it to be a certain way.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. But it doesn't mean that we can't gather information from that. Similar conversations occur when candidates are invited to editorial boards, right? They're asked questions, there's a response, the members of the board will gather information, make a decision on whether or not they're going to endorse a candidate and then do so and write something up. I think in the same way that's a more complete process, I think voters are doing that when they're watching these debates.
I mean, Jen, you said earlier, you and Dennis both said, well, we've had Visconti in and just fired questions at him. Is that a better way anyway of finding out?
Well,
or just a different way?
It's a different way. I think that you gather different kinds of information from the different forums. Me, as a journalist, asking Joe Visconti questions and his reactions is going to be very different than him up against Tom Foley and how they interact with each other. I think it's a responsible, or a responsibility of the public that when they're watching this, that they go and they get their other information. They watch multiple debates. They go online. They research what they heard. I think that's the best way you're going to be able to form an opinion. Is everything going to be solved from that one debate? Are you going to watch it and have all of the information you need to make your decision voting? I don't think so.
Dennis, that's kind of the paradox. You watch an interview and think, well, that's no good. You got to see them debate to really find out who they really are. You watch a debate and you think, well, that's no good. You've got to watch an interview to find out who they really are.
Well, all the voters are different. They have different things that concern them. Some folks are concerned about gun rights. Some are concerned about lower taxes. And if those questions aren't discussed in a debate, then they might feel that they got nothing out of it. Others, school teachers, they want to hear a lot of questions about education. And if they only get one, then they might feel let down by that particular debate. So I think you have to serve all the voters out there. And there are some who might just vote Democratic, they're going to vote anyway, and they just want to watch. There are some who are going to vote Republican anyway. There are some who are on the fence, but they want to know about X, Y, and Z.
All right, that's going to have to be the last word. In 2 hours, I have to try to step into Dennis House's big and very expensive shoes and try to moderate a debate. Oh, I'm so scared. That's right. Okay, I don't believe that. All right, so we'll tune in for that if you can find it somewhere, and we're going to carry it. I think tonight at 8. I think that's correct. I think we're going to carry it at 8 tonight. Thanks to Kevin, to Dennis, and to Jen for coming in here today, and we'll be back tomorrow with the nose.
Candidate Hill, your thoughts on funding for public radio?
Yes, I believe it was Terry Gross who said, "Ask not what public radio can do for you, ask what you can do for public radio."
That was Jack Kennedy. Well, sort of.
You're no Jack Kennedy.
I'm Kyone Wolf. Ugh.